there was anybody else.
Right, when I read through them, I didn't miss that, but sorry.
Okay.
Let's table them then.
Oh my God, Jim. The biggest centipede just crawled underneath your. Oh my God.
I hate something.
Oh my God, it was like this big. He went underneath Jim's desk.
I don't see him in the light.
He was really booking it. He's probably under the.
What was he doing, carrying a mouse?
I don't know, but he was pretty big.
I can't sit on my computer back.
Oh my God, Jim, I'm sorry. Watch him. God, don't send him this way, Dan. I don't like him either. You see him? Boy, Dan really look at him. Sorry, Sean. It was a giant centipede.
Oh, yuck.
Not crawling up your pants
Man.
or anything, is it?
That was a
They
big.
don't eat much, so.
No,
It's supposed to be a good bug.
it is. They eat
Yeah.
other insects.
A
Yeah.
great bug.
They take good enough.
Like a spider.
Spiders.
Yeah.
It's one of their favorites. Good for them, huh?
And mosquitoes.
No.
Look at Carl's staff report.
I like it. I think it's a thing of beauty. That's the first one I could actually read.
Oh boy.
Especially like the maps.
Yeah.
You know. The staff report is a little big.
What's that?
I said the staff report is a little big, but the maps are great.
Yeah, on the smaller size, it's a little hard to figure out where that
Lot 19.
lot 19, where the sign was gonna be at.
You know, or anything we look at, you know.
7 o'clock.
Is it?
Yep.
Let me plug this thing in. I got distracted with that millipede.
What's that?
I said I was distracted by the millipede. I need to plug in my computer before it goes beep beep.
This one?
All right.
That's not.
Carl, you should show me your.
Okay, should we call it up, guys? To order.
Well, that's a lot for 19. Okay, fine.
Good evening. Today is June 9th, 2021, 7 p.m. It's the Village of Vernon Plan Commission. I will call the Village Plan Commission to order with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Roll call and open meeting law compliance check.
President Carl Fortner.
Present.
Trustee Commissioner Jim Sloney.
Present.
Commissioner Dan Noack.
Present.
Mr. President, note for record, you do have a quorum of your Plan Commission, and note for record that the 3 members are the current members on the Plan Commission. The agenda was posted inside and outside the Vernon Town Hall, to the media, to other businesses in the Village of Vernon and the Village of Vernon's website. You are in full compliance with the open meetings law.
Thank you. And we do have Sean Malarkey by telephone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we will start with the item 4A, Citizens Bank request for temporary signage for Pheasant Run subdivision, including a special exception from section 300-13I for display. Sean, why don't you kick us off? There is no one here from Citizens Bank, so if there's questions, we don't have anybody to ask. But why don't you kick us off and walk us through what they're asking?
Sure. Yeah, this is a pretty simple matter. Essentially, what they're asking for, the bank, Citizens Bank, is asking to put a temporary sign up at the Pheasant Run subdivision to advertise their financing of the project. Temporary signs are regulated under our ordinances and need to be reviewed by the Planning Commission and the board. Normally, the time of the extent of time for temporary signs is 21 days. The petitioner is requesting a timeline of 6 months instead of 21 days. We do have a special exception process as part of our sign code that would allow you to consider that. The property, the subdivision is zoned R1. Essentially, temporary signs have to follow what the underlying zoning district is for signage, and that essentially is limited to 16 square feet in total. So for this particular lot, they're going to be placing the sign on the northeast corner of lot 19, sort of where the new road would come in from County Highway XX. It would be set back at least 10 feet from the right-of-way and all property lines, which is required by ordinance. It would not exceed the height requirement, which is 20 feet. In terms of the special exceptions, if you're following along on page 2 of my staff report, number 4 talks about the special exceptions that they can be granted for unique situations. And so essentially the village board can grant an exception after receiving a recommendation from the Planning Commission. You don't have to find that there's necessarily a hardship here or practical difficulty. What they'd be asking for is an exception under 4C of my staff report, which is, in all districts, the village board may make such other modifications of the signage requirements as it determines to be necessary and appropriate to the circumstances. So basically a blanket provision that allows you to make changes. The village board, upon receipt of recommendation of the Planning Commission, must determine that the exception will not, and listed A through F there on page 2, will not be inconsistent or contradictory to the purpose, spirit, or intent of the ordinance, will not violate the spirit or intent of the signage regulations, be contrary to the public health, safety, or welfare, but rather shall promote the public health, safety, and welfare, will not be will not be hazardous, harmful, noxious, offensive, or a nuisance by reason of noise, dust, smoke, traffic, congestion, odor, or other similar factors, will not cause substantial adverse effect on the property values and desirability of the neighborhood, and will not be incompatible to the surrounding land uses. So you have to make a determination that what they're asking for, which is the extension of the time frame from 21 days to 6 months, will not violate any of those. And so if you choose to grant the exception and approve the signage request, I have prepared 5 conditions as part of this. They are essentially that it's been determined that it will not violate those things listed in A through F above, that would comply with the Village Waukesha Code of Ordinances, that would be installed as shown in the application, the 3x5 sign, that they'll obtain the proper permits, they'll get the sign permit, and then reimbursement of expenses. So essentially, it would be limited to 6 months if it's approved, based on the date that the sign permit is actually issued. So 6 months from that date. So I would add that this is the first. I think this is the first time I reviewed temporary sign in Vernon. Maybe not, but it is a little cumbersome for something like this. Subdivision signs, marketing signs or bank financing signs are pretty commonplace with subdivisions. So in my opinion, we should work toward adding in language in the ordinance that makes this easier to approve in the future, and that's something we'll talk about later on the agenda in terms of changes to the zoning ordinance. So that's all I have on this one.
Hey, Sean, what about our ordinance 300-13, capital E sub 7? Under prohibited signs, number 7 says, all signage promoting products and services integral to the use of a business or service located off the premises of said business are prohibited. I mean, isn't this a Citizens Bank promotional sign and it's off premises? That is, it's not at the bank. It's off premises.
Karen, can you repeat that?
He's asking what section of the ordinance?
300-13E7.
313-E7. It speaks of a business having a sign that's off premise.
Oh, an off-premise sign?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's advertising the business, but it's more advertising, I think, their financing of this particular project. So it's not really off-premise in the fact that it's tied to this site itself. So
I don't know
I think
about
you could argue
that.
maybe there is some gray area there, but it's not like this is a piece of property that has nothing to do with Citizens Bank. I mean, they were part of the project, and these types of signs are, certainly commonplace in subdivision development.
Gray area is being generous. I would say it's prohibited.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if that's the way you guys feel, or if that's your position, I mean, that's certainly one way.
And then the next question is, if it is, could it get waived? I personally don't have any issue necessarily with a financing provided by a particular bank at a construction site or a subdivision next to, provided it's on the same lot or next to the other side.
To play it safe, Carl, you could certainly count that as, you can waive that requirement as well, because you have sort of blanket authority. You can only waive a certain percentage of square footage or setbacks, et cetera, but you otherwise have a blanket ability to waive things. So if you felt strongly that this is in fact an off-premise sign, you could consider that in your exception.
Sean, what do other communities do in that instance?
The question from Dan Nowak is, what do other communities do in the same circumstances Citizens Bank is requesting?
There's usually a provision in the code that handles specifically these types of signs. There's usually a marketing sign or a advertisement sign related to subdivisions and those types of things, or real estate in general. Usually real estate signs, and so that's handled under. It's basically. Sometimes they require plan commission board review. Sometimes they're administrative review. I kind of like the idea of having it so that it's under a certain size might be, and time frame might be staff review, but anything greater than that would be plan commission and board review. But yeah, real estate signs are usually its own category.
I would say in this case it's going to be considered a temporary sign and not an off-premise sign.
I guess that's my interpretation. It's a temporary sign. It
puts it
happens to be off premise in the bank, but it certainly has something to do with this property, and it is temporary. So, but Carl makes a good point. It's not 100% clear, and so if you felt strongly about it, you could grant an exception to that as well as the time frame to be safe.
Well, and
if you had a mind to approve it,
right? Just the way the ordinance is written. I mean, you say it's temporary, but that doesn't mean the rest of the rules don't apply. It doesn't say that. But to your point, Sean, about the ordinances, yeah, this needs to be fixed up.
It needs the sign ordinance needs some help. We've talked about this. We've talked about sign size limits based on certain districts, and so yeah, it could definitely use a little bit of work.
Sean, a classic example is the development that's happening on 164 and Town Line Road in the village of Waukesha. We must get at least 2 to 3 phone calls a week asking what's going up there. And I know DJ and Sons, they don't have the sign anymore, but they had a sign right in front of their building advertising who is the builder for what's coming.
Right, not allowed. Not allowed.
It's already, it was there and gone.
Right.
There's nothing in there for construction signs?
Dan's question, is there anything in our ordinance that addresses construction signs, temporary construction signs?
No, nothing. There's nothing. And so those types of signs, those things you see every day on sites that are developing, there's a place for those. And I don't necessarily feel like those should be prohibited. And it shouldn't be a big cumbersome process to get them approved. So, like I said, that's something I would like to discuss with the Planning Commission and Board going forward for changes to make that a little easier to interpret in the code and maybe a little easier to approve.
Now, the armed group, they haven't come in for a sign. Are they going to have one? Do you know? Did they consent to this?
Oh, yes, I did talk to Ron Beam, who's a part of Army Group and is the owner of the property, and they did consent to the sign.
Are they going to have their own sign, or are they going to come in?
I don't know about that.
I don't think they need one. 2/3 of the lots are.
No, he told me they don't even need one because they've already sold 2/3 of the lots and they're going like crazy.
Yeah. I talk to Ron once a week. So Sean, do they have to go, they don't have to go letter by letter on, or do they have to go, I know you talked about it in your
Well, I think there should just to be some general discussion. I mean, there should be, if you don't have to go through letter by letter, but if nobody feels that it would violate any of these things, I mean, you can certainly make a blanket statement about them all. But if you felt like you need to discuss the details with anyone, you could do that as well. I think we just need some statement that you feel that it will not, it will not be any of those things.
Right. Are we to the point of the exceptions we're granting are against the 21 days and off-premises advertising? I mean, I just reread it again, and I just don't see, with there's letter O, sign special exceptions, and the catch-all meaning saying that we could, on recommendation, the village board can basically ignore the entire ordinance and make up its own rules. I don't think that's very good public policy, but that's for the next item is, ordinances and how things should be changed or where on the priority list that should be. But it seems to me that we should make that recommendation, if we're so inclined, make that recommendation too. We're really modifying or making a special exception for both 21 days to 6 months. They're not here. Why they need 6 months when 2/3 of the lots are done? I don't know where the 6 months came from. Without a subdivision sign there too, it's just going to be a financing sign, which might look odd, but I guess. But otherwise, I have no issue on a temporary basis on construction sites, whether it's a subdivision or a new building, to have a sign constructed by or subdivision by and marketing sign, here's the lots and little diagram and a financing by. I really have no issue with that so long as the signs are, not a nuisance or eyesore to the neighbors and, they're together on one lot at the beginning of the, at the entrance of the subdivision or the project and are temporary, during construction. Jim and Dan are nodding their heads, I think in agreement.
Not on the off-premise sign, I'm not.
Okay, Dan's not on the off-premise side. Okay,
Actually,
Jim?
neither am I.
Okay.
I caught that as well. And I was questioning that at home, partly because I was looking at the ordinance because of that sign out over there on the corner.
Right, and that's an off-premise sign as well.
That is flat, an off-premise sign.
Right.
And so I
Advertising
said,
a product.
Right.
yeah,
I
product
don't
and
know if
service.
Citizens Bank here is advertising a product.
Well, service, says this ordinance says product or service. Service is financing.
It says financed by, probably, right? Is that correct?
That's what it usually says, yep, financed by.
Well,
I don't know what I don't remember what the sign itself said, but yeah, usually they do.
Well,
Up on Highway 59, for the construction that's up there for,
with financing
Waukesha.
from Citizens Bank.
right, so they're promoting their financing. They're announcing that they have financing.
yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't promoting their bank and their business of financing, they wouldn't be asking for the sign. So, I mean, it's an off-premise sign. To me,
It's never been considered that by any community that I work with.
Yeah,
Right.
you're the only one that thinks that way, girl.
well, I read what it says, and I can read. I don't know what else it could be considered.
Temporary sign.
But that's not the way the ordinance is.
But the ordinance
read.
doesn't really say that
Say
temporary sign.
signs are Right, these are prohibited signs no matter what. I mean, you can't say, well, it's a temporary sign, it's got its own rules. Well, what about rule number 4? Signs shall be placed not to obstruct with interfere with vision triangles. Well, that applies to all signs, temporary or whatever sign. So that list applies to everything. It's the only way it can be read. Now, you can say, and certainly say, well, that's not how other communities write it, or, you know, I would assume they're writing it differently or writing it the proper way, I hope.
Usually you got temporary signs and temporary construction signs separate, you know, under that same temporary category. Okay.
Jim?
But we can waive that criteria
Yeah, I think so.
in this.
Well, that has to come from the board.
Well, we need a recommendation, I suppose, to the board to
Yeah,
do
that's
it.
what Sean said.
I
You
would,
want-
Right.
yeah, I would, that's what I was thinking, that plan commission could recommend that to the board, that they waive that condition.
Sean, did citizens say anything about the 6 months, why they need 6 months, or that's long enough, short enough? They just
Well-
made that up, or what?
Well, I mean, the 21 days is not enough. They figured it might be under development for about 6 months, and so that's why they chose.
Sean, with no disrespect, with the price of lumber, it'll be longer than 6 months.
Yeah, but they're not financing individual
Then,
homes.
then,
they
they'll, then they'll have to
finance
come
their
back and
home.
ask for.
But not every one.
I don't know. Do you know that?
I'll guarantee it, based on the math, Karen.
Well, just to be difficult, I could get Citizens Bank to go out and give customers a special rate. But what would the criteria be for waiving that particular issue?
Which one?
A through F. You look through A through F.
Yeah, I can't bring it up right now. Online, it says
Do
it's an invalid PDF format.
you don't have your packet?
No,
We gave it to you at the last.
that doesn't mean I use it. I do everything online.
I've got it here
But,
if you need a
you know, the
copy.
criteria we're talking about is waiving that issue about the,
The 21 days, there's 2 issues to me that need to be waived under our ordinances, the 21 days and the off-premise signage.
yeah, the 21 days, I don't see an issue with, but it's the off-premise sign.
That sign has to do with that premise,
It does.
in my opinion.
They,
But now you're reading another word into
You
the
couldn't put
ordinance.
that sign across the street. We wouldn't allow it.
Shouldn't.
Wouldn't.
Can you put it on any lot?
You put it on my lot? I have a good location.
Can't put it on your lot. Can't put it on my lot.
The ordinance says located off the premises of said business. Okay, the premises of said business is Citizens Bank, not the lot.
well, that's true of almost any service.
I don't know what else
either
that means,
On
Dan.
that,
Well, if he doesn't have an issue with it, then why are we even talking about
Yeah,
it? If he doesn't have a problem with the sign, what?
that's why I was asking if we did decide that we had to waive that criteria or whatever, what would a valid reason be?
Could you get that, Sean?
Just because we like Citizens Bank?
Well,
did
Sean
you
didn't
hear
bring
that?
it up, so I don't think it's an issue for him either.
Jim, trustee Solani is asking, what would be a valid reason to waive the 21 days and the off-premise issue?
I didn't care about the 21. I care about the off-premise.
Yeah, what's the valid reason to grant a special exception or,
Well, only because it wouldn't serve any. If we limited this to 21 days, it wouldn't serve the purpose for which the sign is intended. I mean, obviously, it's intended to be visible through development, and maybe it's not going to make it all the way through development because of lumber prices, as you mentioned, but to limit it to 21 days would be, you know, there would be no point to putting the sign up for less than 21 days.
Would go to
It would
the
serve no
off-premise.
purpose. So as a real estate sign or a financing sign, 21 days, it's a special type of temporary sign, but the 21-day limit would seriously hinder the purpose of that sign.
And then Trustee Solani's question is the off-premise issue. Why would we waive that?
Oh, I don't, only because I think that the ordinance is short-sighted, for one. I think the off-premise signs are really intended to be, the way it's written in the code, to be nothing to do with temporary signs, but it's really to do with permanent signage. And so we allow temporary signs, and a very, very popular temporary sign are real estate signs or financing signs. And so I think two sections of the code contradicts themselves, because it would be impossible to allow any similar sign, any type of real estate sign for financing if you prohibit all off-premise signs. So I just think that the code as currently written needs some work, and so this is a quick fix until we can actually fix the code.
Do we need to fix it in this instance right now?
Dan's question is, do we need to fix the code in this instant right now?
Yes, we do. I mean, I think that's why it's on the agenda for changes to the code. Now, honestly, though, it may take months and months for us to get through all the
It's the next
changes to the code, because signage is just a part of it. So we could do that, and we could tell them they could wait for 3 or 4 months, and that, you know, that's your prerogative.
Dan, he's talking about later on the agenda, prioritizing revisions to the zoning code.
Right. Under sub I, temporary signs, all temporary signs in any district shall conform to the standards of 300-13 and shall not be displayed for a period to exceed 21 days. And approval shall be obtained by the town, now village, plan commission, and town, now village board prior to display. That's what it says about temporary signs. And I agree, Sean. It seems to me when it says the plain wording of this, shall conform to the standards of 300-13. That's the entire 300-13, including the prohibited sections. And this sign is prohibited. I don't know how you can read it any other way. It's very generous to say that's gray. However, I will say, because of O and sub 3 and O, that basically says you can make other modifications to the signage requirements as it determines to be necessary and appropriate to the circumstances. You could change that. You could say off-premises financing signs are okay. In particular, this case. Pardon me?
No, they're all in favor of it.
I can't read body language, and I can't hear everything, but everyone's in favor of the sign in general, right?
Right.
Yes.
Dan, are you in favor? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think the issue is further down on the agenda when we're talking about clarification, not only the sign ordinance, but you know yourself how many issues we have to fix in the zoning ordinance.
Right, and that's you know, I think one of the reasons you can state in your determination is that, you know, we feel that there are issues with the code, and this is a pressing issue. The subdivision is being developed. They like to put their sign up. Time is of the essence for them, I would imagine. And, you know, we are going to address these issues. So it's really the unique circumstance here is partly because there's some issues with our code.
Right. And you're listing out of reasons, is it inconsistent with or contradictory to the purpose, spirit, or intent? This is really not reasons to approve. It's factors that we're supposed to consider in making our recommendation or approving it. And is it inconsistent or contradictory? Does it violate the spirit or intent of the signage regulations? Is it contrary to public health, safety, or welfare? Is it hazardous, harmful, obnoxious, or offensive? No. For any other reasons.
Is the sign it going to cause any issues?
Yeah, substantial adverse effect on property values.
Right.
It's in the subdivision. You know, it's temporary. It's going to come down, right? Be incompatible to the surrounding land uses. Again, it's temporary. It's going to come down, you know. It's on lot 19. It's going to be removed. Right, and it's at the entrance across from Meyer Drive. It's not like it's across the street from somebody who comes out their front door and looks at it every day.
Correct.
Which you could say, you know, is some kind of nuisance or violating the, you know, has a substantial adverse effect on the surrounding property or something like that. I don't see that sign doing any of these things. Sean, and I assume you agree too, also.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think a temporary sign that's up for 6 months is going to cause any problems for neighbors or the surroundings or reduce property values. And so, and also, you know, it will solve an issue for now with our sign ordinance and allow them to proceed. And knowing that we intend to fix things, to make changes.
Right. And so if we approve it with your conditions, one of the conditions is they say they're going to install it on lot 19, and so that's part of it too. So they've marked it.
Right. So if you look at condition number 1, the language is in there about the special exception. We could amend it to state the Village Plan Commission has recommended per section 300-13O of the Village of Vernon Code of Ordinances assign special exception to allow an off-premise temporary sign and the temporary sign to remain on the property for up to 6 months from date of issuance of the permit has determined that the exception will not, you know, A through F. So it gets both exceptions in there in number 1.
Oh, yeah. That's good. And we just need to make a determination, I suppose, by motion that will not, you know, A, B, C, just what we just listed off, D, E, and F. You got a typo. Number 2, Sean, the sign will comply with 300-13 of the Village of Vernon.
Happens all the time. Sorry about that.
Fines double since we're a village now for more than a year.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, I got 2 people to laugh. 3 signs shall be constructed. That's what their sign application, where it is, the 3x5 and all of that, right? And they gave us a picture of it, so that's what it should look like. And then 4 and 5 permits and pay fees. Comments, guys? What?
Ready to make a motion.
Ready to make a motion? Ready to make a motion with those 2 changes as we just did.
Karen, have that wording?
I got it all, yep.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that the Village of Vernon Plan Commission recommends to the Village of Vernon Board approval of the sign request for Stephanie Bonesteel for the property located at Lot 19, Pheasant Run Plat, Oakdale Drive, Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Subject to the conditions set
As
forth,
listed.
as listed and as modified, right?
Right.
By this meeting.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Opposed? Nobody. So motion passes. Sean, we're on to ordinance priority update now. I know we talked about this at staff a little bit, and
What does everybody have in front of them for materials?
The same thing you presented to staff, Sean?
The ordinance list?
Yes.
Okay, so they don't have it. When I was at the village board last time, the village board staff meeting, we went through the list of ordinances that are sort of on our radar. We prioritized them last time, but at the village board staff meeting, we decided that we would consider moving forward with the issues related to the zoning ordinance or improvements related to the zoning ordinance. And I was asked to prepare a cost estimate for consideration as well on that, which, Karen, you do have that, right?
Yes, and I emailed it to everybody.
Okay, sounds good. So the idea, I guess, is just that we tackle some of these pressing issues that have we've been collecting for the ordinance. And I'll quickly go through those in terms of the priority list. So it's basically everything that's at the top of the page under Chapter 300 zoning. We've already done the Shoreland Overlay District. The Shoreland stuff is done pending final enactment of the ordinances. So that was priority number one. Same thing with floodplain zoning and shoreline wetland zoning further down, Chapter 305 and Chapter 306. Now that those are sort of wrapped up, we can look ahead to other things. And that's Chapter 300-16, legal nonconforming uses. Attorney Macy has made, it's even been a couple of years ago, made recommendations to update that section of the ordinance per fairly recent statutory updates that affect legal nonconforming uses and what you can and can't do. And so he also provided a memo, Karen, I think you have. I'm not sure if everybody got emailed that as well or not. But there's some rationale in his memo. The same thing for variances. There's been updates to variances and use variances versus area variances and how those are handled. So we should update the code for those. We talked about parking requirements in Chapter 300-12 in terms of our list of parking requirements is a bit outdated in terms of the uses and the number of vehicles. 9 times out of 10 when something's proposed in Vernon, not for residential uses, but for commercial uses like contractors' yards or other things. There's nothing in there to go by. We don't have anything that's sort of a general category or a parking requirement for those types of uses. So there's just a lot of things in there that just don't apply, and so that could be tuned up a little bit as well. We just talked about signage. The big issue for signage in my mind for Chapter 313 is the extremely limited commercial signage and business signage, and so we don't want to open it up completely, but I think we need to provide a little more flexibility. We saw a sign come up for with the Clum property, which was 5 Star Energy, and the sign that they wanted to do was individual lettering mounted onto the building, and it wasn't even a big sign, but because of the restrictions of our sign code, they had to shrink that, and it no longer made sense to do a more attractive individually lettered sign, and they just went with a cheap, plastic backlit panel sign in its place because the scale didn't make any sense anymore. So I think we need to look at sign area. We talked about temporary signs tonight a little bit and some of the problems there. So that could use some work. Conditional uses, that's still on hold. Remember, we made some changes to conditional uses in the past. We took a lot of things out. We made some minor tweaks. Again, I don't think now is the time to bring a bunch of those back into the ordinance. We are still waiting for the county to undertake their process as well, and so there's no rush on that, especially since anybody can come forward and propose a conditional use at any time, and we can add it back in. So essentially, it's those things in Chapter 300, and then if you go further down the page, it's Chapter 144 and Chapter 125. In Chapter 144, that's our commercial and industrial development standards. That was located outside of zoning before we even had zoning, and that allowed the Plan Commission and Board to review commercial development and look at site plans and have some say in what happens outside the zoning ordinance. My opinion is that should be brought back into the zoning ordinance, and we also need to look at changes for landscaping. We currently don't have any landscaping standards. It's just basically, hey, submit a landscape plan and we'll look at it. So we should have some landscape standards. I think we can take a look at the architecture and material standards. And then there's a section in there on letter of credit that requires letter of credit that we've been waiving because the way it's written, it applies to the whole site. And so we definitely want a letter of credit for work in the right-of-way or work, installing new public roads, but we don't necessarily want them to provide a letter of credit for their entire proposed development. So I'd like to touch on those things. And then finally, Chapter 125, building construction, all of our accessory building requirements are in that section as well. And again, the same issue. Before we had zoning that allowed us some say on accessory buildings. I believe that should also be brought back into the zoning code and removed from Chapter 125, because that's usually where you see it. That's where all of the regulations are. I don't have any specific changes per se to accessory buildings, though. Once we bring it back in, we can discuss, and if anyone has any opinion on potential changes to that, we could consider them at that time. So that's for this priority of things. That's kind of what we talked about at the village board meeting. I did provide a cost estimate. We can do any or all of those things at this time. I don't know what's left in the budget this year, Karen, for planning and zoning related matters. But I'm flexible. We can do, like I said, as many or as few as you want for changes to the zoning.
Sean, the state of Wisconsin is requiring us to modify our building construction ordinance now. I just get a final draft from the state, made the last revision for Vince to review, and going to bring that to the board because the state wants our ordinance changed 3 months ago. Is there going to be any problem with getting that passed and then taking it out again and putting it into zoning?
Well, what's the timeline for that?
It was supposed to be done as soon as possible.
So they're probably not too concerned about our accessory building size and setback requirements and those, and that's really what's in our accessory building section. I mean,
Correct.
The stuff that they're concerned about
Is a uniform dwelling code.
is the uniform dwelling code and those types of standards. So I don't necessarily think that's an issue, but it might be nice to get it out of there before that gets amended for them.
But then if we take it out of our current 125 and it's not in our 300, there's an issue there, correct?
Well, yeah, if we take it out of 125 now before it gets replaced, of course, yeah, there's definitely an issue because we won't have any building regulations.
And
we could also duplicate them for now if that's a problem. We could just bring them into zoning if we modified zoning now, and they would be in two places at once. And then when you modify the building code, you could just take them out of there.
Yeah, see, the building code needs to be done. It's going to the village board for their review next Thursday, and then to the attorney. So the state wants this, they wanted
So is it all of Chapter 125 they care about? I guess I just don't know enough about what they're looking at.
That's what they've been reviewing, all 125.
All of Chapter 125, okay.
Yes. And we've gone back and forth.
So I wonder if it would make sense now to ask them when you resubmit it to them or bring it back to basically state that the accessory buildings are coming out or we're thinking about taking them out and moving them to zoning, and to see if there'd be any issue with that.
Oh, I can ask the state that tomorrow, but that's my only concern is we wouldn't want to take it out of 125 until you've brought it into 300, and then we could remodify 125.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we could modify or make changes to Chapter 125 and then move the whole thing to zoning maybe later
And just redo the building.
and just redo it
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah, because we'd want to have something in some ordinance.
Oh,
until-
absolutely. Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, you can't be without.
Yeah. You're right, their issue with our ordinance was single-family dwelling, commercial dwelling, uniform dwelling.
Right. Yeah, they don't care where the accessory building is located or how big the lot is compared to the accessory building and what the materials are. They don't, that's not a concern.
What is the issue there?
The issue is the state of Wisconsin is reviewing all municipalities' building codes. They started with electrical throughout the whole state, and they looked at ours and had a big issue with ours amongst.
Ours doesn't recognize the state requirements?
Ours, it does, that there's an issue between our attorney and the state. That's, our attorney totally disagrees with the state. He's drafted language that he disagrees with the state, but the problem is Vince is having a hard time with the state of Wisconsin, the way our ordinance is drafted. So we've made all the changes that the state wants. Yeah, I know. And the board, it's going to the board and then to the attorney. But
If our ordinance says we adopted the state requirements, what more do they want?
they want all the old language out of it.
The
It's,
authority to do that.
did you say, do we have?
State,
Oh,
Tell you to take stuff out of your ordinances, but
bring it into compliance, yeah, all I know is,
Part of the,
yeah, our
that's part
attorney,
of the dispute, yeah.
our attorney totally disagrees with the state. But Vince's life is miserable with the clash between our attorney and the state. So he made all the changes as it relates to the, some of the language, how administrative codes changes and the SPS and, it's all the acronyms that are in, the old acronyms are in our old ordinance, but Attorney Macy does have the language that reflects any changes in the state administrative code and safety codes. He's got that language in, but they disagree. Yeah, our attorney's very angry about it. I'm not misstating that, am I, Mr. President?
No,
okay.
no. You read our ordinance and it does conform. It just does. It's an evergreen. It picks up all the changes and,
Well, what's the state gonna do if we don't change it?
well,
I should ask Vince. I know they're
Vince
giving,
is having
they're
a
giving
hard
a real
time,
hard time to Vince.
right?
And he just wants to get it changed and the state off his back.
The state is on Vince's back?
Oh, yeah, for the changes to the ordinance?
He doesn't have anything to do with it.
I don't know. Just go between. So, Carl, do you need Sean?
It's not up to him to change them.
Okay, so, yeah, so Sean, where are we headed with this? What do we have to make a decision? First of all,
Well, I think the board has, the plan commission should make a recommendation as to which of the items we should pursue. Again, I did provide a cost estimate, and then pass it off to the board, and the board will, kind of give the go-ahead based on the budget and what's, if we're able to do that.
right, so we do have priorities listed. What we're saying is, well, shoreline floodplain and shoreline wetland is already done. Those were priority ones. Building construction, chapter 125 is a priority one now, due to the state. And then we've got priority twos, legal non-conforming and the variances, impact fees, small telecom wireless. I assume that you concur with those priority twos. And in addition to a priority two, you were saying, well, we should probably put signage up there and commercial and industrial, chapter 144 in priority
Right.
two, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I lumped basically everything that we have on the list related to the zoning ordinance. I did include in my estimate in case we wanted to move forward on it.
Right.
We don't have to do that. The small telecom wireless does show up as a priority too, but I don't believe that's going to be in the zoning ordinance. That is going to be, I think, a separate ordinance in the code of ordinances.
Would that be in the right-of-way ordinance?
Yeah, it is in the right of way, so I believe it should be in the right of way ordinance.
Because we did do some changes to that
Right.
not too long ago, Sean.
Yeah, we did, some.
Right, we did, and again, I don't, that language for small telecom wireless in the right of way, I don't have any experience with that. I know Attorney Macy does have some, and he may have some sample language from other communities. So we could tackle that regardless or on a separate track, but I don't think it would be me that would head that.
Right, and the same would go for impact fees, correct, Sean?
Right, impact fees as well, right?
Well, we need to do something about both of those items. Sooner rather than later, I suppose. So to me, priority two would be a good place for them.
I mean, one way to do it would be to, if you agree with the changes as proposed, or the sections that we're going to tackle in zoning, if you agree to them, to recommend moving forward to the board, and then if the board feels that we have, once Karen lets the board know what the budget's at, and maybe you've done that already, Karen, I don't know, they can pick and choose off the list to, based on the priority.
Well, I know at staff board wanted feedback from, planning commission first, and then.
Yeah, in terms of which they think are the highest priority, right?
Right.
That's correct.
Right, and then if there's budget, it depends on what we have budgeted for 2021, and then what we're going to need for 2022.
Right.
Right.
I mean, just because it's priority 2 doesn't mean we're going to get it done by the end of the year. It might have to wait till early 2022.
Because we have about 10,000 in zoning codification, but we do have some ordinances that need to be codified already that have not been codified. And then we have 20,000 in the planning, which we haven't spent much of. But when we're looking at Sean's, and I'll redo this again for the Plan Commission before, after I say this, I'll redo your notes to them, but they also have to take in consideration of the legal review, not just your cost, Sean, it's the legal
Right,
review.
yes, there's Attorney Macy costs for review and sort of enactment of the ordinance.
Right. I don't think there would be any other, do you think at any point there would be engineering costs or review in regards to any of those zoning ordinances?
Not for the zoning
Okay.
issues, no.
Okay.
So are there any on the list you think we should not, maybe are not priorities for now? That might be easier to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, you said, well, conditional uses, we're waiting on the
Right.
county, so let's wait there. Parking requirements, I mean, that could be a wait.
Could be, sure.
Hobby kennel ordinance could be a wait. So those, to me, would be the wait, priority 3, wait, as opposed to a priority
Right,
2.
but hobby kennel's not in the zoning ordinance.
Right, it's just sitting there.
Should it be?
Should it be in the, yeah, Dan's saying, should it be in the zoning?
I don't think so. I think that's usually out of zoning ordinances. It's not really a planning zoning related issue.
Well, it governs the use of your property, I suppose. How many dogs that you are allowed without a special license.
Yeah, I guess I don't have any experience seeing it in zoning ordinances, so we could talk about it, but I just don't know.
Number of animals required or allowed on a property or in the zoning ordinance?
Yeah, like whether you
every
can have horses
municipality
or
has
chickens.
has an ordinance on
whatever.
animals,
Isn't
and that's usually where these types of things are found.
Say that again, Sean?
I said every municipality has some ordinance on animals, right? On dogs and on
Right.
domestic animals, and that's almost never in the zoning ordinance. And I don't know of a single instance where that's handled in the zoning ordinance. It's almost always a separate ordinance. So we can explore that, but what would be the purpose of bringing it into the zoning ordinance?
People can go to one spot to find out what the regulations are for their property.
Okay.
Yeah, ease of finding things, I guess.
Right.
It just govern the use of property. Well, it needs to be somewhere. I don't know,
Well, it already is somewhere. I mean, it's in it's 11710, and the reason it's on the list is because there was questions about the number of dogs,
Right.
because people kept, were asking for more dogs than were allowed in the ordinance.
Where do I go to find out how many horses I can have on my property?
Well, you go to the zoning for that.
Isn't that one in the same?
Oh, did he answer you, Dan?
Dan's asking if you can equate the two, basically horses on your property and then dogs on your property. And I see your point. I do see your point. I just don't ever see zoning ordinances with the number of dogs as a factor in any one. So we would be an anomaly. And maybe there's a good reason to do that, like you said, maybe because it's easier to find. But I'd have to do some research on that. I just don't have any experience with it.
Wasn't it in the county ordinance? Hobby kennels? I thought it was in the county zoning ordinance.
I don't know, possibly. I mean, kennels, yeah. A kennel is one thing, right? And so,
Yeah.
we had it in our ordinance too. I mean, a commercial kennel we had in our ordinance,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So if you run a commercial kennel, that was a conditional use, and
Right.
so that was one thing. The hobby kennel was not, and we could refer to it in our ordinance. We could certainly put something in there that stated if it's not, if it's not doesn't meet the definition for a commercial kennel, then it's a hobby kennel, and then you go to this section.
Yeah, we spent about $2,000 on ordinance codification so far.
So we have some money.
We have about 8,000 left there, and then we have another category for,
So what does constitute it? I just don't know. You guys probably know more than me. The hobby kennel ordinance. What is the limit on number of dogs?
right now, it's, if you have more than 2 dogs, you have to have a hobby kennel.
Okay, so once you have more than 2 dogs, you get a hobby kennel license, right?
But I know we wanted, the village board talked about changing that to 3 dogs. If you had more than 3 dogs, then you had,
Right, and that's why it's on the list here, is because
Right.
that was the recommended change, or the proposed change. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to review that whole. I don't get into that. Chapter 117 is not something I deal with, so I'd have to review it and see if taking that out of there would impact the rest of the ordinance in any way and make it more convoluted.
yeah, you'd want it to stay as clean as possible, wouldn't you?
I just don't know. I just don't know that ordinance, so I'd have to look. But at any rate, so far we have it as priority 3
Right.
on the list. But if we're opening up the zoning ordinance and you feel strongly that it should be there, we could take a look at it.
Well, we wouldn't have to decide that tonight, I don't think.
No, don't have to decide tonight. We can always, as we work through some of these zoning ordinance changes too, I could bring back more information on, that aspect of it, and we could decide then too.
Well, sure, Sean, when we start getting into this, there might be all kinds of things that you
Right.
come up with. Just like signage. I started reading that very carefully, and it's like, well,
And examples of what other communities have.
right.
Take a look at them. Are we that far out of line, or is there a lot of things we don't have? Or?
Dan's just
Right.
saying, let's look at other communities to see what they have and see where we are.
Yeah, we certainly could do that as part of the research. We could provide some examples.
But as far as zoning goes, these are the ones that we know about. I mean, the ones you've listed. So there might be others as we get into it. And it's to Dan's point, there might be others that we come to our attention because other communities do it differently or better. So what are we looking for? A recommendation to our village board to what? Prioritize?
Well, if there are no, so basically my cost estimate lists all the things that I kind of put together for changes to the zoning ordinance, and so I guess it would be great if we got a recommendation to do all of those things pending board approval and pending there'd be budget to do so.
Sean, and no disrespect, but changing town to village, we could do that in 3 seconds.
Well,
No
we
offense.
could, but there's also a bunch of things in here with the county
Right.
processes that have to be taken out.
Yep,
And so
yeah. Then it probably,
there's more to it than just searching for town and replacing it with village.
but when you're talking about that, you're just talking, you're talking all 300, 144, all those, because we took them all out of the building construction.
We took them out of building. We took them out of the recent changes that we just did for shoreland, et cetera. For all that says village, for instance. All the changes we made to the conditional use section replaced town with village, and so it's a work in process. But this would be all the rest of them for the zoning, and then cleaning up, like I said, any inconsistencies with county oversight as discussed in the ordinance as well. So all in all, it's a 2 or 3 hours of work when it's said and done.
And then, if the board doesn't mind, Commissioner, can I ask on Attorney Macy's letters from 2018, do those have a significant impact, Sean, on what the recent provisions in non-conforming structures and lot uses? Is March?
Yes, that's the whole reason for the changes. We're making changes to the legal nonconforming section of the variance section based on his recommendations from statutory changes.
And those letters date back to 2018, and
Yeah.
they're a little bit, it's 2018. I think these letters probably should have been acted on a little quicker than we have.
And I wonder if there's any changes to any of those sections since 2018.
Yeah, and there may be, and we'll certainly take a look at any changes since then.
Questions? I'm taking some notes here, too. Jim, Dan?
No.
So I'm thinking that we should probably recommend to the village board to make changes and update our zoning ordinance as outlined with the priorities as discussed.
Did we change some of the priorities as listed here?
Well, the priorities that I've changed this is from Sean's May 21, 2021 letter, would be Chapter 125, building construction would now be a priority 1. And Chapter 144 would be a priority 2. And signage would be 300-13, a priority 2. Is the one I marked. If you guys have different ideas.
I had 2 as a 1. I had signage as a 1
Oh, instead of a 2, but
instead of a 2, but
Has that been a real issue?
the signage? Well, we had the Clumes come in and had to downgrade their sign really, which was unfortunate, just based on how our ordinance was worded. Just saw tonight issues with how that sign, the ordinance was worded.
And developers calling in and reading our ordinance,
Yeah.
so.
So, yeah, we could, whether it's a 1 or a 2, I'm not sure if that's going to make it, I think Chapter 125 being a 1, we're going to proceed just because of the state,
yeah, that one,
But
that's the first priority. For
right,
sure,
the
that one.
the signage being a 1, is that going to spring ahead of Chapter 144 or, or legal nonconforming and variance? You're not going to do that in isolation, it seems to me. You'll be doing those all together when we look at 300.
From a plan commissioner's standpoint, I had birth to do all of them, but
Sure,
I
yeah.
don't know how much money the
We
village
have,
got,
yeah.
so I'm not involved in that.
Right, how much money is left in the budget, what she's checking? We've got to look at,
I guess
get a legal Macy an estimate so we know how much to budget, how much we can do, hope to do, I should say, in 21, and how much should we be looking at for 22
Yeah,
to finish the job?
Just don't tell John how much you have in the budget.
Yeah. You never do.
I mean, Sean, it's nice that you lay out a cost estimate for the Plan Commission and Village Board so they can know from a planning perspective, you know.
Well,
what they-
yeah, and I was asked to do that, so, and I'm always happy to do it, of course.
So, do we have enough money to do all the number twos this year, plus the building construction?
Building construction. The only thing that's gonna have to be done after we adopt it is take out the provisions of the accessory building and putting, you know, but that still is, you know, something to do.
Right, that's something to do. So yeah, we can get chapter 125 done. The question, I think, then would be, well, how much money do we have to work with? Remaining money we have to work with
We
for
definitely,
21, and then how much do we need to budget for 22? And whether we can actually get that in the budget. But that again, Dan, like you said, that's village board.
Yeah.
We have some ordinances sitting on the shelf that have not been codified, but they're ready to be.
we're waiting for legal review.
For how long now?
Which ones are those?
The last three, the overlay, the last one we
Right.
just did, all those three ordinances are still waiting for legal review. Floodplain should be easier to codify because we've never had one before. Much like the shoreline, the overlay, those should be easier codifications because there is not going to be any type of amendments.
Once legal review is done, what's the cost to finalize them, to finish?
It depends on the size of the ordinance.
Well, of those three that we got laid out there, do you think?
I could get a cost estimate on what it's gonna cost. Those, the floodplain shoreline, those could all be, those all have been charged to stormwater because it really relates more to stormwater.
Yeah.
And we do have money in stormwater. So I've been charging that back to that account because they truly do relate to our overall stormwater review of the village. But I'd like to look at that too.
We could probably get a cost estimate from the people who codify our ordinances. Those are pretty thick, page-wise, they're
Right, right. That's
They're
what I'll
not-
do, Jim, in the meantime.
not 2 pages, they're
Right,
Yeah,
20, 30.
because, we gotta get those done first,
right.
in my mind.
And what I'll do is I'll send what we have. I mean, floodplain's ready to go. But the other three, so those four, I'll get a cost on that and then get you that amount. And then we'll have to do the codification of the building construction unless we don't codify. That's what we should do, is put it as a new law on our website while it's pending the
Right.
revision. Don't codify that one until after we've taken out the accessory. You know what I'm saying? We'll keep it on our website as a new law. And then when Sean takes the accessory code out of the building construction, then codify the construction after Sean's got it cleaned up. Wouldn't you concur, Sean?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's what we'll
Otherwise, we're wasting our money codifying it because it's gonna,
change again.
change again.
But it still would be existing law. Once after legal review, once it's posted,
Right,
then it's legal.
right.
So the only other costs we have besides whatever the codification cost is legal review and Sean's time.
That's correct.
Is that right?
That's correct. There is even a small, publication notice, but those are minimal.
Yeah.
It's always nice to let the public know that you're doing those.
Okay.
So Carl, do you need Sean?
Yeah, Sean, yes, Dan?
Question on Sean's letter of June 3rd. What are the general minor updates?
Dan's question is, what are the general minor updates on your letter of June
3rd.
3rd?
That was when we discussed with the village board, basically, Karen, that was, you mentioned that, Vince has a list of a few
Oh, yeah.
cleanup items, you have a
notes.
list of a few cleanup items, just minor little things that we have noted, in the ordinance. I don't have the full list yet, but it's basically words and phrases that need to be changed that don't make sense.
Town to village,
What's that?
town to village.
No, it's more that we found, when people do an application, there's ambiguity between, one part, so Vince has notes, I have notes. They're not substantial, but just to raise it for plan commission and board when you're reviewing them.
Where does that fit into our priorities here, right?
Well, if you're amending your zoning code, that's when you want to get your
Do it all.
comments from the building inspector and zoning administrator that work with that day in and day out. And when we run into this, we highlight it to say, oh boy, this is something we got to take a look at, or make the plan commission and board aware of this issue so we can get it corrected. Just like Carl noticed what he felt was, a glaring contrast in the code.
Well, you say amending our zoning codes, we've got all different priorities for different sections of that, right? So when would that minor updates be?
Sean, he's asking when the minor updates would be incorporated. Wouldn't that be when you're doing your overall, wouldn't that be incorporated in when you're looking at the zoning code?
Yeah, whatever we're authorized to move forward on, we would do all of it at once for whatever you allowed us to do. So if we're looking at signs and legal nonconforming uses and variances, for instance, we would also do the town to village stuff, take the county stuff out of the processes, and then do all the minor updates at the same time. So it'd be nice to do everything at once because it would save money on the process.
Right, so that would be a priority too in our kind of our
The
hierarchy.
here's the thing: the more times you open up the zoning ordinance and make changes and go through the public hearing process and get attorney review, and draft in the enacting ordinances. I mean, there's fixed costs and sunk costs for these things every time you do it, and so the more you can do at once, the better, because those things are fixed every time. You're always going to have public hearings. You're always going to have attorney review, and so you're going to save some money if you do it at one time.
Do we need a public hearing to do the minor updates?
Sure. Anytime you change anything in the zoning ordinance, you have to have a public hearing.
Right, anything in zoning requires a public hearing.
So it's a good thing too for plan commission members to look at the zoning code. I mean, maybe there's areas that they also feel, are a contrast in another part of the zoning, or are ambiguous or gray per se.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a plan to redo the whole zoning code. I mean,
Right,
these are
that's
targeted things we're looking at, but there's a few things code-wide. I mean, that's the town to village issues, it's the list of the minor updates, but other than that, we're going to try to stay focused on, these particular sections, except where they may have cross-references and there are connections with other parts of the code.
I remember the driveway issue, the concrete and paved surface and TB. That came up with the Siege development. It came up with the Walter development. It came up with the DJ Mine and Some development.
Right, about asphalt versus
Right,
concrete.
right.
And, yeah, exactly.
And then, like you said, the letter of credit for the I mean, that's not it is a big deal. Remember,
Yeah, the letter of credit kind of is a big deal. That's
yeah, because I mean, it's one thing to do a letter of credit on a total development at $4 million, or a right-of-way improvement at $500,000.
Right.
yeah,
That's a big.
that's a big deal.
It's a big difference, right?
Well, we could change all the priorities to priority 2, and with priority 1, you do immediately priority 2,
That's kind of what I was thinking.
and not distinguish between in effect, not distinguish it between the priorities. And see how much we have the budget, see how much we can do or work on and for 21, and I'm sure it's going to go into 22.
Right,
These
and,
kind of numbers, it has to.
and Sean, I could give him, you know, good information on what you gave me. I just have no idea what the legal review on those are gonna be.
Well, you'd know better than I would, only because you know, you see the invoices on
Right,
like the stuff we just did for shoreline and floodplain, and what the bills, you know, for the floodplain ordinance, how much time you spent reviewing and then preparing the enacting ordinances and so on. So that might be a start. I just don't know.
the only thing there is that it's not a good start, because I think the attorney knows he does not have much authority to regulate over what the DNR says for a floodplain ordinance.
Right.
True. So yeah. So he didn't look too hard at the specific content of
Right,
that. Of
yeah,
those.
yep,
Right, we really needed to follow the DNR model. And then we needed to refollow it when they gave us the wrong model.
yep.
I mean, it's hard to pin down. It's hard for me to do an estimate like this too, only because there's always things that come up that you're not thinking about. There's extra discussion about this item and that item, and we bring it back for a couple meetings, and you take your best shot. So he's probably going to have an issue with pinning it down to a number, because you just never know. It's very hard to give an accurate estimate. But I did my best, and so I think what I provided. I think is pretty good idea of what it'll cost from my end.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. It's helpful.
Yeah, of course. And anytime you guys ask for an estimate or that type of a thing, it's always going to be on our dime. That's this type of thing, when we put the estimate together and sharpen our pencil, that's a Fourth cost, not a Vernon cost.
Well, should we make a recommendation to the village board to proceed with updating the zone, making changes and updating the zoning ordinance, subject to budget constraints for 2021 and 2022, and as far as priority, and with the same priorities to each of the items listed, right?
Right. You got that?
No. Rambling.
I'll make that motion then.
Or you could say by consensus. If you want to do a consensus thing, or if you want to restate your motion, Carl.
Well, I suppose by consensus, we could say the Plan Commission is recommending that the Vernon zoning ordinance be changed, subject to budgetary constraints as in 2021 and 2022, with a priority, with equal priority to all items as listed by Sean, other than the priority ones that are, already adopted in the Chapter 125 building construction, which obviously is a priority one. So
that's consensus?
now by consensus, I see, yes, Dan?
Priority ones that we've already
Adopted,
they
yeah.
still have to be considered in the.
In the budget.
In the
yeah.
money.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
get codified and everything, right?
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
I think we've got a consensus, Sean. Right, men?
Yes,
They're all saying yes.
yes.
Okay, great.
All right, and then we'll table the minutes because we got to look to see who seconded, and we did get the size from you. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Good night. We'll see you next month.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you very
You
much.
too.
All right.
See you tomorrow, Sean.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So I'll make a motion to table those minutes, May 12th, 2021. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, so they're tabled till next meeting. Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
I was looking up sign ordinances. One community